Through a museum and see a group of people gathering around a painting. You fight the crowd for a moment, barely squeezing in between others, trying to peek at something life-changing. Instead, you see a canvas with what appears to be the work of a toddler, dog, and possibly a hamster that were let loose with an open can of paint. How can this be considered of any value in society when compared to Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci, or Rembrandt? Abstract art is not intended to represent reality in the traditional sense. Instead, it expresses relationships, ideas, feelings, and thoughts in an artistic form. Today, I'm going to explain how abstract art can be very valuable to our society as a way of expression for those who have difficulty communicating their thoughts and feelings in a typical way. First, I'm going to discuss a connection between artistic drive and mental illness. Next, I'll explain how abstract art, in particular, speaks a different language that realistic art can't. Lastly, I want to pursue the understanding that abstract art can give us when it comes to those suffering from mental illness. I've studied art for about 10 years and taken multiple art classes, as well as being an amateur painter. The emotional effect that art had on me and on my own work has been the inspiration for this speech, as well as the fact that many members of my family, including my mother and my daughter, suffer from mental illness and have found solace through art. Artistic expression can often be misunderstood, much like mental illness, and I hope this will instill a deeper understanding of what value abstract art gives us. First off, mental illness and art. Over 2,000 years ago, Aristotle said, "Those who have been eminent in philosophy, politics, poetry, and the arts have all had tendencies towards melancholia." Unfortunately, this seems to mean that those who are gifted with creative abilities often end up paying for it with mental deficiencies. Melancholia is defined as a mental condition marked by persistent depression and ill-founded fears. Dr. Nancy Andreasen, a leading psychiatrist and neuroscientist in her field, had focused her studies of the brain on the creativity between creative people who suffer from mental illness and creative people and those who suffer from mental illness. She published the results of her analysis, finding that a surprising high rate of creative minds, 80%, suffered from mental health issues compared to a non-creative control group, which only suffered 30%. Her research has been followed up by multiple studies reflecting the physical and chemical similarities between creativity and mental illness, both focusing on dopamine levels in the frontal lobe of the brain. A few famous artists that suffered from mental illness are Vincent van Gogh, Edvard Munch, Pablo Picasso, Jackson Pollock, and Georgia O'Keeffe, just to name a few. To explore another concept, abstract art as a form of expression is essentially a different language. Mentally ill individuals need another way to express themselves. Dr. Andreasen suggested that the artistic mind may have a version of schizophrenia that loosens their associations enough to enhance creativity, but not enough to lose touch with reality. This means that those with such an illness need a disconnect from what they're experiencing in life and a chance to express it, while still being part of the real world. Expressing themselves to others as well as introspection is essential to everyone, but if what you are experiencing can't be amalgamated the way that most people do, abstract ways might be the best way to form that. Thus, we see art as a language many mentally ill people use to find a solid footing. Edvard Munch even said, "My troubles are part of me and my art. They are indistinguishable from me, and treatment would destroy my art. I want to keep these sufferings." This is an example of one of his most famous pictures, The Scream, and this reflects the visual representation of his internal emotions. Another example of this is a boy named Neam Jain, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2 and has had to use technology to communicate with individuals since then. In 2016, his mother introduced him to painting, and he found a passion as well as a talent in it. His abstract paintings reflect the artistic world that he is already a part of and that a mentally healthy person might not actually perceive. Autistic individuals have a hard time processing emotion and comprehending, but his paintings reflect a certain degree of understanding that wasn't there before he began painting. They gave him purpose as much as inspiration in his life. Finally, let's talk about how abstract art can heal. We've all watched the TV show where a psychiatrist asks a patient to draw their feelings, and usually it solves a murder or a child abduction. The reality is that art has been used by psychiatrists to express themselves in a non-traditional way, express their patients in a non-traditional way since the 40s. This often brings understanding, validation, and even healing through art. One example would be the Prinzhorn collection. This is gathered by the art historian and Dr. Hans Prinzhorn. It's over 5,000 drawings made by his patients at the Hildeberg Psychiatric Clinic in Germany. These drawings allowed the therapist to start a conversation about his patient's thoughts and feelings that they weren't able to express in any other way. The drawings reflect sadness, anger, trauma, terror, fear, anxiety, and multiple other feelings, thoughts, as well as delusional imaginings that haunted them on a daily basis, and only the use of art was able to ease their concerns. Currently, art therapy is a licensed branch of psychology that focuses on helping individuals, both children and adults, to resolve many personal issues through a creative outlet. Often their artwork isn't sensical in the most traditional form, but very abstract because that is the way their mind interprets traumatizing events, complex emotions, or even creative imaginings. In conclusion, abstract art may not seem valuable, but when you take into account the artists who are suffering from an internal struggle and a mental illness possibly, understanding, analysis, and appreciation of their art might be viewed a little differently. Often the abstract work of artists is considered great because it has the power to reveal a world that a mentally capable person might never get the chance to visit. As terrifying and useless as art from a mentally distraught person might seem, 18.5% of Americans suffer from a mental illness in a given year. Having a window into their lives and the challenges they face can be truly priceless.